Hello, hi, and how are you? This is Coach Saft and the Running is Life podcast. And today, as the title of this podcast often does, it tells us that we are going to be talking about improving ourselves. And I found this article. I was really weighing through and sifting through the internet and seeing if something would speak to me, because I wanted to speak to our own improvement and our own improvement in multiple facets. I'm always looking to improve in life, in my professional, personal, my interrelationships, and of course in running. Anywhere, obviously, we can make improvements, especially after the two recent DNFs that I've had. Sometimes I like to take a step back and assess. And I've assessed my training in the past, and perhaps that's another conversation. I made some stupid mistakes that I've made in the past, and we are human, and to be human is to err. And I err often and consistently. So if there's one thing I can say about myself is I'm consistent. I have historical patterns that I can follow that oftentimes lead to similar results. And, I hate excuses, and that's part of this. Not that breaking ribs is an excuse, and I have a hard time dealing with the fact that I was taking out for something beyond my control. So I look to other answers to kind of see where were things going sideways and what could I have done better, because they did go sideways. And mentally, I can say that I failed myself. I oftentimes can get through a race without a pity party, but I had a huge pity party, and a lot of it came from the mental component. So I started looking at the internet and saying, well, what are ways that I can improve mentally, and what are ways that you and I can learn together and do better for ourselves. So I'm going to share this article, and it really just gives us ideas of things we can do. It's not a blueprint for how to do it. That's up to us. Up to us to want to make the change, and it may not be ourselves that we can do by ourselves, right? So in other words, maybe some of these things we need other people's help in order to be able to accomplish and improve and grow. And when I finished reading my post in the last episode, I said, let's grow together. And I think this is a way we can do so. And so, while I'm just putting a guide together to help us, if you will, an outline, we're going to fill in the details. And whether we do this together, whether it's through coaching or through communication, I love it. I just recently had another runner reach out about the Grand Slam and asking questions about the Grand Slam, not even for coaching, just for advice. And I love that. He said, "What can I do for you?" And there's nothing and that's part of what we'll talk about today as well, is just giving back. And that's what I hope to do throughout this podcast and through my communications with you. If we form a coaching relationship, that's wonderful. That's certainly, I would love that, but it's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to grow with you. And so I hope you'll take this into consideration and read this article and see what you can do as well. So the article title is 21 Super Effective Habits of Highly Successful People. Now, I just read Will France's article and his newsletter. That's my strength coach, and he talks about how he hates when it's the 7 best exercises for every runner. And I was hesitant to kind of pull up a list, but I think these, again, warrant talking about and talking through. This is more than just like 7 exercises to make you better. This isn't clickbait. This is things that can effectively make us better people. So again, it's how we use them, right? It's how we use these things. And to kind of expound upon Will's idea is we can't be sucked in to think that there are miraculous exercise routines that are going to be one size fits all, right? These 21 ideas further expand our capabilities, right? So those 7 exercises may be great and they may be really good. So how do you incorporate those 7 with some other things that will make you successful? Right? So it may not just be those 7 exercises. It may be that there are, 14 that are good for what you need, right? And those 7 may be a part of that. So taking a look at it is not harmful, but we can't just limit ourselves to that capacity, just as we shouldn't limit ourselves here to these 21. Right? There may be other things that we need to work on, but this is groundwork. This is setting us up for success to say, I'm going to take a look at myself and I'm going to determine what can I do better to make me a better person. So 21 super effective habits of highly successful people. It starts out by saying, look at challenges as an opportunity to evolve. Explore unfamiliar environments, realizing that discomfort is the path to growth. And I think that's a wonderful summation of really what we try to do as runners, right? Because we are accepting challenges in order to evolve as runners, in order to evolve as people, because all of this, it changes us, right? And we go out and explore unfamiliar environments. We go to races in places where perhaps we've never run before. And realizing that discomfort is the path to growth. We have to, embrace that discomfort when we race in order to be successful at a race. So a lot said there, a lot of crossovers. So this starts out by saying, go outside of your comfort zone. Now, that was evident, right? And that's something that, if you've read The Comfort Crisis, which if you haven't, I've mentioned it quite a few times in the past few podcasts because it has such a great impact upon my mentality, my shift in what I'm doing within my life. And we can talk more about that and changes here in this conversation because obviously, I want to be honest with everybody, right? I want to be open so that you see, changes can be made, right? You can make these changes, and it all starts with wanting to do them, right? You start there, and then again, make the plan to do so. So going outside of your comfort zone, a lot of times we select races that we're familiar with, right? We do, oftentimes we do a race over and over again, right? And sometimes we get a better result. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And that's part of racing, right? But if we take ourselves outside of that comfort zone, outside of that race, and we challenge ourselves with something different, we get to gain a new perspective. We get to gain new insights, new information about ourselves, and potentially unlock some abilities we may not have even known about, or we may learn about new coping mechanisms, new physical attributes that we weren't aware we actually had. So being able to go outside of your comfort zone is great. And it may be that you go outside of your comfort zone within the training cycle itself, right? So if you're building towards, let's say, the Boston Marathon, right, and you're saying, okay, well, one of my downfalls or one of my weaknesses is actually strength. I'm not as strong of a runner as I'd like to be or as I should be. So accepting and going outside of your comfort zone and saying, well, maybe I need to implement some form of strength training, right? It may be that you select, this race over and over again. Let's say, it's your local, whatever, your local 10K, your local 50K, right? And you're like, I do this one every year. Now, while that is a challenge, right? Is it taking you outside of your comfort zone, right? Is it going to challenge you, right? To really see if you can accomplish it, right? Going back to the book that I was just referencing, going back to The Comfort Crisis, the author Michael Easter talks about the misogi, and this is a challenge that, and forgive me if I get this wrong, I'm speaking from memory here. I believe the Japanese accepted this challenge, this misogi, as being able to do a challenge that had a 50% rate of failure, right? Like this was the very, very hard thing to do, right? And not knowing if you could finish it. But in that challenge, again, you're putting your physical and mental capabilities in heightened awareness, right? Like we're really saying, can I put myself through this, right? Which oftentimes leads to growth. And that's the big thing here, is being able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's where we'll grow. So they say, go outside of your comfort zone. Look at challenges as an opportunity to evolve and explore unfamiliar environments, realizing that discomfort is the path to growth. So I challenge you to try that, to try to go outside. Now, some of the rules that follow with that is it can't, put you at risk of death or injury. Everything, obviously, Tour de France, I got injured. Everything, there's risk of injury too, but like we want to make sure that we limit the potential for serious injury or especially death. There's a lot more to that. So I'm not saying go out and create your own, misogi. Like that's not what I'm stressing here. I'm saying look into that, learn more about it and see how can you challenge yourself. Number 2 says, aim to always get better. Constantly push your limits and set the bar high for yourself. Yes, that's again what this whole point of this podcast and really our running journey, our lives in general is about, is always aiming to get better. How can we improve? I was feeling a little bit stale in my coaching, in my professional life. And I was kind of looking for a way to kind of get some new ideas, to freshen it up, to even revisit previous ideas that maybe I had forgotten about. And with the adults that I coach, oftentimes we select a book to review, and one of the runners suggested the book, Uphill, Training for the Uphill Runner. Sorry, book's downstairs. But anyway, I will put that book in the show notes. It's the coach that he just successfully trained the winners, both male and female, for UTMB. Killian Jornet is also a co-author on the book, and he's taking. It's not a blueprint. Again, it's not, here's what you specifically need to do. It's here's the concepts and here's how you can apply them to your training if it makes sense. So, I'm reading through that book and hoping to create some new concepts for my runners, right? Some new ideas to implement within their training if it makes sense. I'm not looking to totally revamp everybody's training, but I'm always looking for ideas to improve runners. So, I am aiming to get better so that I can better my own athletes that I coach. So reading through that book, I'm at very beginning right now. I haven't really gotten to anything that's new to me right now. It's just understanding the physiology of the human body. Currently, I'm learning about the energy systems. Again, I've been through this topic. I couldn't tell you how many times I've learned the energy systems, but it's an important review because it gives us the basis of what performance is, what human performance is based off of. So, it is good to review those things and try to remember these are some founding principles that should be applied to training, right? And understanding where those come from lets us understand training and how we can do it better. So aim to always get better. Number 3, it says embrace learning from mistakes. Now, that's always at the forefront. As I kind of talked about with Tour de France, I made numerous errors, and I wanted to try something different, and would it have worked out? I don't know, right? I stopped at 40. I can tell you that at that point, my quads were, had been wrecked for miles. So, I didn't do enough, obviously, in training to really be highly successful at Tour. So looking back, it says we all make mistakes, so the best thing to do is learn from them and avoid dwelling on the past. This will free you to move forward instead of always looking backwards. And that's very true. And I think looking backwards sometimes can be warranted. As I said, I made some of the similar mistakes that I've made in the past. I stopped strength training, and that was dumb. Like, I really should have kept up with my strength training, but I stopped for whatever reason, whatever excuse I gave myself. And it probably was an excuse. I'll just say it was an excuse. I should have continued with strength training. That was dumb. Every time I go through a podcast and review something, every time I say I didn't do strength training, usually I'm talking after a result I wasn't happy with. So I've learned from that mistake. I had a great discussion with my wife, and we said warranting a strength coach is worth it. So once my ribs heal and I'm capable of strength training again, we're going to bring it back into my training cycle. So, learning from those mistakes is very, very important. If I were to do Tour again, I would certainly make longer downhill descents. More of a part of my ladder training. So as it got closer to Tour de France, I would have been doing more downhill running to get my quads, ready. Not overdoing it, because that can cause injury, but that's a piece that I felt was missing. Now, I did my best with what I could do, and I said that before the race. Like, I did everything I could with what time I had. Now, could I use my time more effectively and included strength training? Most certainly. I can think of times where I just wasted time doing something frivolous that could have been time spent strength training. So, as I said, I don't want to make excuses for myself. I just know that I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So I'm embracing learning from my mistakes. Yeah, that's the best thing we can do. Number 4 says find fulfillment within. And they say, put more emphasis on inner happiness and self-development than on outer validations such as fame or status. In this way, what you're doing will be more meaningful. And that's succinctly, in everything we do. It's not just with running, finding fulfillment at work, fulfillment within your family, all of these things, they make us happier when we have that fulfillment. And if we keep that at the forefront, that's vital to our happiness and to our, our mental growth. So, finding that fulfillment within a race, if it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, if you're doing a race over and over again and aren't finding fulfillment and joy within it, is it actually worth training for? At some point, it's going to be very hard to keep training if you don't find that same fulfillment and joy in the experience, right? So if it starts to feel like work, and going back and thinking about it, that's what Western States started to feel like. It started to feel like work. I enjoyed my training for Tour, right? I really did enjoy my training for tour. I was finding fulfillment in what I was doing. So, there's that piece of it. Even though I know pieces were missing, I thoroughly enjoyed the process. And I was trying to enjoy the race itself. That was difficult for multiple reasons. And again, this is part of it, trying to, understand where did that go wrong, especially on the mental aspects. So, finding that fulfillment. And that's something I think moving forward that I need to consider. So I hope you can find the same fulfillment in everything you do. And if you can't, then I hope you consider changing things so that you do. Number 5 says, be optimistic. Accept that bad things will happen in work and life, but remain optimistic, realistic, but resilient. And that, that's huge right there, that statement, be optimistic. Especially, having just DNF'd Western States and the Tour de France. That's hard. That's definitely a mental hit. Now, I know in both of those races, I really couldn't have continued forward. And that's tough too, right? Like it's something went wrong. Obviously, Tour de France was way beyond my control, but at the same time, it's a hit. I had no finishes in any race this year. My last ultra finish was at High Lonesome in 2024, July of 2024. That's tough. Like that's tough to realize. And what I take from it is that now I have more compassion and more understanding for my athletes if it happens to them. I hope to God it doesn't. Like I really, really hope that my athletes make it through. But, unfortunately, it's really hard to have 100% finish rate at any. So, a testament to my runners, they are tough as nails. I had 3 runners at the Yeti 100, all 3 finished. Mike Reardon, who I hope to have on the podcast here pretty soon, he just ran the Mammoth 200 out in California and had an amazing experience. So I'm hoping to have him on soon. Rachel Blinn and I already have a date set to talk about her Tour de France because that was her second finish in a row and what she went through. And it was amazing watching Rachel. But, being optimistic and putting yourself in that situation where you are, as they say, realistic but resilient, right? Like you have to have that optimism to say, if I sign up for this race, there is a possibility that I will finish, right? There's also a possibility you won't, because that's the realistic part, right? That's, part of the Misogi, what we talked about earlier. But we have to have that optimism going into it that, okay, I'm providing myself with this opportunity. And that's what it is. It's an opportunity. And either way, you have that opportunity. Whether it results in a finish or a DNF, it's still an opportunity. And that's the way we need to present it to ourselves and not stress so much about what is the outcome, because the outcome is what it is. Right? Like we do everything we can to finish, but as I've proven, there's sometimes where it doesn't. It doesn't happen for whatever reason. So we have to be optimistic and accept that bad things possibly can happen. And that's again what they say in work, life, and whatever. Right? So being optimistic is not a bad trait. Number 6, avoid multitasking. Prioritize deep work. This is the hardest thing to do for my lifestyle. This is where I've tried to be more, focused and assertive with my time. They say, focus on digging deep into problems, solving them one at a time. Instead of trying to juggle too many balls in the air at once, this improves productivity and reduces anxiety. So let's take what's going on right now. Okay, so I have my adult coaching, so coaching my adults. Now, that requires writing schedules pretty much on a daily basis for the following week. It also requires me to check in on them on training peaks. I do that every day, leaving comments and making sure that nothing needs to be changed or fixed. So, there's my adult athletes, right? Then I have my high school athletes. So from 2:30 to basically 5:30, 6 o'clock, I'm with the high school team. So that's a good portion of my time, about 3 to 3.5 hours of my day is with the high school athletes. Now, right now, they're beginning to get into the postseason. So next week, we as a high school, and that would be me, we're putting on our county championships. The following week, we, that being me and my team, are putting on the conference championships. So I'm putting on 2 championship level events the next 2 weeks in a row. So I have that on top of all of my workload, right? Plus, I have my family. I need to take care of my daughter and make sure that I'm attentive and doing things for my wife and our house and our dogs. So there's a lot, right? So it is hard not to multitask. And I guess the way that I'm working around this is I am designating time to each, and I'm doing it separately. So if I think of something that has to pertain to another task, I simply write it down. And that way I remember to come back to it when it's that designated time. Okay. So, what my day typically looks like right now is, waking up and making sure my daughter is ready for school and seeing her off, walking my dogs. And then if I can, I just thankfully started running because it's not causing pain to the ribs. So I go for a short run and then come back and I sit down and work on Training Peaks. And so by that time, it's usually about like 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'll start working on Training Peaks. And then sometime between 11 and 2, I usually take my athlete phone calls and talk to them. And then in between that, continue to work on Training Peaks. Around 2:30, I go to practice. Again, I'm there till like 5:30, 6 o'clock, come home, and then I plug back into Training Peaks and then try to finish up scheduling as well as check in on my athletes for the day. Then we have dinner, and typically after dinner, I set aside some time either to finish up with Training Peaks or to start reading The Uphill Athlete. So that's what I'm up to right now. Now, with preparation for cross country, I try to get through all my scheduling by Friday so that on Friday I can focus my usual work time on cross country and preparing for the week ahead. Doing schedules for the kids, creating the newsletter and communicating everything about the meets that are coming up, as well as any meet preparation that I need to be doing. So, and I do a little bit of time each day to that, meet preparation because there are a lot of moving parts to that. So it is tough, but again, instead of multitasking, instead of trying to do multiple things at once, if I designate the time to them and understand that, that piece of time is solely for that purpose, right? And not being distracted by those other pieces or stressed by those other pieces. And that's the key. And that's really hard sometimes because there is so much, this past weekend, the Girl Scouts did a wonderful project and built trail signs for the Rugby Middle School, the trails that we've built over at the Rugby Middle School. So we had to put those up. So, I got together a crew of volunteers and we went out and set up all the posts, which was really cool. This weekend, we have to do some course maintenance on our high school trails to have them prepared for the county meet. So again, trying to set aside time for these events, right? So, being able to focus on a task and be present with the task is something that I think meditation has helped me understand in being present with what you're doing, right? So, setting the focus on what task is at hand and being present with that task and not worrying about those other things, knowing you have designated time to handle those. That's the way I handle all of the tasks that are around me, and it helps me reduce my own anxiety because I know I've set aside time for that. Now, does that always work out? No, of course not. There's other things that pop up and I need to reschedule, but understanding that that there is a possibility of rescheduling and doing it at a different time. So yes, that's really hard, and it's taken me a long time to realize how do I be present with multitasking. Number 7, value relationships and connections. Oh my goodness, yes. Prioritize building and growing your network of relationships and connections. The more people in your network, the more effective you will be. coaching is a network, right? There are the athletes that we coach, but there are also other coaches that we rely on to bounce ideas off of, to learn from. There are also other professionals that we seek advice from, such as physical therapists, such as strength training coaches, such as dietitians, right? So there is this big network, right? Because, as a coach, we always say we're the jack of all trades, the master of none. We wear so many different hats, but we also need to know where are confines, where are we not supposed to cross boundaries, right? There are certain times where it's beyond our capability, it's beyond our understanding, it's beyond our knowledge to go beyond that. For instance, as a coach and as the trained coach that I am, I cannot diagnose injury. When somebody says, I'm having pain here, what do you think it is? I mean, certainly you can say it sounds like, but, in order to really know, you need to have it diagnosed by a medical professional. So, knowing those boundaries, but again, it creates more and more relationships, and you get to know more people and what they specialize in. And that way you can refer, your athletes or your friends, your family, to people who you trust because you've gotten to know them through these connections and continuing to grow in that way. Now, you may seek that in your own professional life, right? You may go to conferences to meet others in your field and learn from them, or to, at least have somebody you can reach out to talk to about certain things within your profession. So creating those relationships and connections are invaluable. And I continue to do so, and I continue to ask questions and hear from others so that I can learn and grow. I don't know everything, and I don't want to pretend that I know everything. When somebody asks me something and I don't know, I simply say, I don't know, but I will find out. And that's when I reach out to those connections, right? So I value those, and I hope you do as well. Number 8, grow through obstacles. It says, follow whatever route offers you the best learning opportunity. Even if it's harder, you will grow as a result. I think that's kind of says it all right there. Grow through obstacles, right? Like when you are going through something that's very difficult, that's the time that you rely on those relationships and connections that we just talked about. And oftentimes, if we reflect, that's when, we get those questions that we can ask those people, and that's how we learn and grow. So, don't be afraid when those things come up. As I just said, if I don't know, I'll ask. And that's the biggest thing, is not being afraid to ask, right? It's, there's no harm in that. And there's no harm in saying you don't know. There can be harm if you answer somebody with an answer that is, it's not the right answer, or you just made it up, right? There can be harm in that, and it can yield results that, affect the person who asked you, and that's not fair to them. So, don't be afraid to ask, grow, ask questions. Number 9, be authentic. The most successful people are authentic. They reveal their true selves in everything they do. I think this is one of the things that I appreciate comments on my social media posts the most, because I am authentic in what I say. Everything is not roses and rainbows and unicorns in my posts. Unfortunately, I don't want the world to perceive me as everything is always okay. And you hear it on this podcast. You hear my emotions. You hear from me when I hurt, right? There are things that in this world don't go our way, and that change us and that shape us. And being authentic to them and being honest and true to yourself and to others is the best thing you can do. And that's really hard sometimes. And oftentimes we shut down when these things happen, when it's quite the contrary. We should be reaching out to those people and those connections that we've made. They're the ones that care about us and will help us make it through. So, continue to be authentic, continue to be honest and open. And that's where, again, growth will happen. Number 10, care for yourself. Regularly set aside time to rest and recuperate so that you're fresh and healthy and be able to concentrate and function at your very best. we oftentimes talk about recovery on this podcast, and that goes for everything we do. I can recognize when I'm not at 100% and I'm trying to accomplish work. Before setting down to this podcast, I was hungry, right? And I know if I am hungry that I am not going to be able to focus and complete a task to 100%. So before I sat down to record this podcast, I had something to eat. That way I knew I'd be more focused and able to accomplish this and kind of give you more of, my understanding and my thoughts on this podcast. So, being able to care for yourself obviously is super important, and understanding when the body needs recovery. And I've done countless podcasts and talked about the recovery process, when we need it, when we should have it. So like if you have questions on recovery, by all means, ask away. This past 2 weeks of no running, while tough, understanding that my body needed to heal, that warranted taking that time off. Whereas so of course, I didn't get the finish. So, our number one response is, well, what can I do next? What can I do with this fitness that I built that I didn't get to use? And sometimes the best answer is, nothing. I need to rest. I've had a long year. I didn't get the results I needed. So sometimes you need that physical and mental break away from it. Sometimes it's okay to say, okay, well, let me take another crack at something else, and I've done that in the past. But for this one specifically, because of the circumstances, due to my cracked ribs, I needed the time off. And I think it's beyond a crack. So anyhow, care for yourself. Know when you need that downtime. Right? Know when you're getting stressed. I recognize when things are getting overwhelming. And that's when I reach out to my wife and say, hey, I'm pretty stressed. I need to figure out how I can take a few things off my plate. Can you help me take a look at the big picture and make me see where are some places that I'm overextending myself that I could be, perhaps doing a little bit less. So number 11, make decisions thoughtfully. It says, resist the temptation to make knee-jerk reactions, especially in emotional situations. My goodness. As I read this, I can't tell you how many tabs open on my internet browser that were linked to various races. It's tough. This is the first year that I will not put in for Western States. That ship has sailed. I'm done with trying to run Western States. I no longer care to qualify for that race or do it. I have a finish there. Unfortunately, it's not the silver buckle that I was hoping for this year, but I want to move on. I want to move on to something else. I want to move on to other adventures and other things, and I'm tired of doing races specifically to try to qualify and get into Western States. As much as I appreciated the opportunity to run both of the years that I did, I've come to the point in my life, here where I'm about to turn 48 here in a few weeks. I'm just where I want to say I'm past Western States. I'm moving past it. I'm going to do other things. Now, I'd still like to run Hard Rock in the other direction. Next year would be the other direction, so I put in for the Hard Rock lottery. Now, if I don't get into that, I have to assess, right? Because I'd have to do another Hard Rock qualifier next year. So when I start looking at those things, that's where stress starts building up. And I start looking at, well, what are the standards? What are the qualification standards for me to do some of these events? And that's where the knee-jerk reaction starts happening. And I start thinking, well, feasibly, I could do this in a couple of months and get it done and have my qualifier. And here, let me give you a specific example, because this is crazy. And this is, where I was, I went up to my wife and just said, all right, I need to take a step back because I'm thinking crazy right now. Okay, so here we go. Let me just kind of put this all out there for you. I would love to do Hellbender. I would absolutely love to do Hellbender. That, having started that race, I would love to get that buckle. That's really high on my priority and bucket list. Unfortunately, the Hellbender race weekend always falls on the state qualifier weekend for the outdoor track high school meet. Obviously my kids are super important to me and I want to be there for them. I don't know what day regionals will be. Hellbender starts on a Friday. Our website lists the regional qualifiers as both Friday and or Saturday. So I don't know what to expect or if I could feasibly even do that. So with that said, I would still need to do a qualifier race because I don't have a qualifier from this year for Hellbender. So I signed up for the Heartbreaker as a just in case. Now, the Heartbreaker, it falls on the same day as the Adidas Indoor Nationals, which my daughter typically likes to do. So again, I fall into conflict. So if I don't get into Hard Rock, I'd still need a qualifier, not knowing if I'd be able to run Hellbender. So I started to look outside of that, and what spoke to me was the Crazy Mountain 100. This is a race in Montana. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I've had a runner do 70 miles of it, and he raves about it. I would love to go out and run that race. So I started looking into it. It requires a qualifier within the past 2 years of 50 miles with 10,000 feet of gain or a longer distance. So when I looked at my last qualifier was July 19th and 20th at the High Lonesome 100, which I mentioned previously. Now, the Crazy Mountain 100 race date is July 24th of 2026. My High Lonesome finish falls 5 days outside of that window. So I do not technically have a qualifier, which now what makes me think, okay, well, how do I get a qualifier in before December 14th? So I start scouring the internet and what pops up, but the Hellgate 100K. Now, the Hellgate 100K is on December 13th. So, that said, I would have to finish the Hellgate 100K and potentially have my wife sign up while I'm finishing for the Crazy Mountain 100. You talk about nuts. That's what we as ultra runners can be. I know some of you have gone through some of the same processes and thought processes that I have. That's insane. And especially given that I'm still not healed from, the broken ribs. Now, I looked at my wife and said, what's the feasibility of this? And what should we do? So we wrote the RD to see, does that 5 days outside of the window? I don't want her to make any exceptions, and I don't want her to have to do that for any runner. And I probably shouldn't even ask, but I did. I asked, would this still fall within the qualifying window? Is that close enough? So if she says no, and I totally understand if she does, that's, totally, I get it. Cause obviously it is outside of that. So, if she says no, then I have to figure out what to do because I won't be able to run Crazy Mountain because I suspect that, trying to do Hellgate would be really tough, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So it's tough. It's frustrating. Again, making decisions thoughtfully. The problem is a lot of times that we're on deadlines, right? And we're trying to, meet these deadlines and not have this knee-jerk reaction. And that's what signing up for some of these races really becomes, is a knee-jerk reaction in order to try to, complete something, a requirement for another race. So, it becomes really difficult not to make that knee-jerk reaction. Now, I didn't pull the trigger on anything. The only thing I did was email that RD. I've requested to sponsor the Hellbender. Of course, I believe in that race and want to be a part of it to whatever capacity I can. So I've requested to sponsor it, which potentially could give me an entry into the race because of the sponsorship. So I may have that as an opportunity if it works out that the track meet is on Saturday and I have the opportunity to race Friday into Saturday and finish prior to the regional meet. So a lot has to transpire for that to actually happen. But, I'm trying to create these windows of opportunity so that I get the qualifier so that I continue putting my name in for Hard Rock because I really would like to run that in the opposite direction. So make your decisions thoughtfully, even if you are in limited time and stressed about the situation. A lot of times that's another good time to talk to your network, talk to your community, talk to those people that mean, they're their input means a lot to you. And that's why I just walked away from my computer and went up and talked to my wife and said, talk sense to me. Because you have to realize when your thought process is getting skewed, it's getting perverted by, the stress of the situations. Okay. Number 12, practice gratitude and generosity. All right. Give thanks for your success and look for opportunity to pay it forward. And this is something that I think I am a huge proponent of. I'm a big fan of how do we give back. Now, my coaching at the high school level is one way that I feel I can give back to this sport and to the kids, to the future of this sport. Trail maintenance and trail building is another. I just finished another trail for the high school. So I built them an entirely new trail that we're going to use for the county meet. And then I've been talking with the Carolina Mountain Club about building a whole new trail for the middle school trail system. So, there's ways that we can give back. Now, yours may be an entirely different way and something that, goes back to the idea of fulfillment. What gives you fulfillment and happiness? What makes you happy? Is it building a home for Habitat for Humanity? Is it serving at a shelter, a food bank, whatever it may be? There is happiness and fulfillment in giving back. And in what way can you do so? Right? I had one of my previous athletes that's now competing in college reach out about fundraising. And I am in a place where I could donate to the program and help them, continue to be a program and have, events that they can go to for their team. So I gave, that gives me fulfillment, right? So, and it doesn't have to be monetary, right? It can be your time and your energy, right? So I stress that if you can do something, giving back, volunteering at races, that's another way to give back and feel fulfillment. It's a great piece of your life, right? In a few weekends, I'm going to be crewing for a friend that's going for an FKT. So, how can you give back? In what ways can you contribute to others' lives that will enrich theirs and give you fulfillment at the same time? Number 13. I don't know if we'll make it through all 21 in this episode. There's 21. So we may, get through a few more and then we'll say, hey, because, I want to make sure that this episode doesn't run too long because there's a lot to consider here. And maybe I've already given you enough to consider. But, it does warrant, a part 2 because there is some great stuff here. So let's go through number 13 and maybe we pause the podcast there and do part 2 for another time. It says, demonstrate perseverance. Continue to strive for success even when you fail because patience and perseverance are keys to long-term achievement. And this is hard. This is really hard. Continue to strive for success even when you fail, right? Now, we all look at failure and success in different ways, right? We all perceive failures and successes in different ways. In failure, we can choose to move forward and build upon it and, perhaps gain success in the future. And sometimes we look at failure as, man, I don't know if I should do this anymore, right? That's really difficult. And that's a conversation I have with the cross-country kids because cross-country's hard. And especially those first few weeks when people are just getting in shape and have never done it before in their lives, those are often the times where I have to have the conversations with the new people the most and say, hey, listen, I get it. This is hard, but it does get easier if you keep doing it and being consistent with it. That's the honest truth. And I think we've all learned that in life and running, right? Is that it takes time to do and be successful at anything. And when we do fail, it does sting. But if we take those lessons that we learned and move forward, as we always say, you're going to grow. So, be perseverant, right? Persevere. Now, I talked last episode, will I ever do Tour de France again? I don't know. I honestly still don't know. There's part of me that wants to go back, and there's a part of me that says, I don't know if I need to, right? So that's a really difficult decision. And right now, I don't have to make that decision, thankfully. I can totally think about it for more time. I have time on this one. I don't have to make a knee-jerk reaction and say, yeah, I'm going back, next year. That I don't have to do, which is really nice, to have that capability. But perseverance, and that's huge, not only in our sport, obviously, like perseverance in our sport is massive, but perseverance in our lives, it's necessary. So, okay. I like ending it there for now, number 13. As I said, there's 21 of these, and I think the next one is a great way to kind of start off the next episode. So we'll pick up with part 2 in our next episode. So next week you'll hear part 2. As I mentioned, I'm going to be recording an episode with Rachel Blinn about her experience at the Tour de France, and so that will come out in 2 weeks' time. So next week you'll get part 2 of this conversation, and then in 2 weeks you'll hear from Rachel Blinn. I'll also be recording with Mike Reardon about the Mammoth 200, which I spoke about, and perhaps I make it a super episode, because we've got some really cool ones coming up too. I've got some really cool athletes that I coach that I want to talk to about their adventures and what they've done. So, some really cool conversations I hope to be coming up, and we'll have spin-off, so those may bring up topics that I want to expound upon and talk about on, solo episodes. So, there's a lot going on, obviously. And I really appreciate you all being a part of this podcast, for reaching out and really providing feedback and comments, because it really does make this really worthwhile. Especially when, as I mentioned, like Mike did, he reached out about the Grand Slam, folks listening to the podcast previous episodes and reaching out to ask questions. That's what this is about, continuing to grow and share together. So I really hope that, this will start to create some meaningful thought. So again, I'll include this article in the show notes. Have a look, and, maybe it's worth some thinking over your next run on some of these things and how they can affect your life, and, make things perhaps grow and challenge yourself to grow, and find different ways of accomplishing things that have been challenging to you in the past. So once again, I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. As always, thank you for being a part of this podcast. If you want to reach out to me and talk anything, coaching, questions about running, anything, please do so. All of my ways of communicating with me are in the show notes. So thank you, my friends. Until next time, keep moving forward. Running is life.